Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Reanimated. This is Stuart, one of your hosts, and joining me also is H.A. Conrad in New York. Good morning. Hello, H.A.
Good morning and hello, hello.
Hello,
Snowy
hello.
morning here, or
Oh,
at least some snow.
congratulations.
Yeah.
It is another silo day here. So the weather is a balmy 72 underground, as always. And we're going to be talking about the safeguard. And we have, because we're doing this in kind of a canned version, we don't have a ton of news, but we have discovered at least one more Korean zombie adjacent show, if nothing else, to mention, and that we might be able to get our hands on one day, and that is The Dark Hole.
Yep. Which
Name
is,
might want to go back into workshop. Not sure.
well, it's also, it looks like it's somewhat of a juxtaposition between zombie and serial killer. So we shall see if we ever get to watch this, what this will entail. The trailer seems quite dramatic, and so we'll see. It was interesting because it almost did feel like a serial killer kind of movie juxtaposed over a zombie movie. So I'm not quite sure how that would all play out. And like all good Korean zombie films, there was like a bunch of school kids in it, where I'm just thinking of, one of
Yeah,
our favorite, one of our favorite series. But
yeah. It looked a lot like All of Us Are Dead from those few
it did
clips. Yeah.
so much so that I thought some of the stills were from it. So did you. So that
Yeah.
was weird. But there you go.
So that's if you want to read about that, there's an article on Collider about the dark hole, or just dark hole without an article in front of it. And it's available on a streamer called Viki, or maybe it's Viki, which I have no idea about. So if you're interested, that piques your interest, go find it. Maybe we will. Not sure. Dark hole.
There we go.
Otherwise, we're here to talk about The Safeguard, episode 9, season 2, Silo, where things are rapidly approaching the end of season 2. This is the penultimate episode. This one is directed by Amber Temple Moore, written by Jessica Blair. There are a lot of ladies directing and writing these episodes this season, I've noticed. Nice.
That's great.
And in this one, we kind of go back in time for the first several minutes of the episode, which is also interesting. Like, what's funny about the beginning of this episode is after the last episode, feeling like we were on a Stairmaster and just like not going anywhere. This one leaves you, it's on fast forward for the for the first like 10 minutes. Um, so this one we start off in a beat up old like little hab in Silo 17. You kind of can tell that you're in Silo 17, even though it's a part of it we've never seen. And these are people we don't necessarily know, but we can pretty quickly figure out who they are and where we are, right?
Hmm.
It's like there's a garden or like an herb garden. There's babies, there's children. There are maybe a couple more people here than we thought. And suddenly we're hearing noises. There's alarms. There's that young woman who we recognize as the archer, and they're hearing alarm. Yeah, like I said, they're hearing an alarm. They're saying someone named Eater is
Hmm.
ringing the alarm, and they run out, and then we see Juliet in her silo suit on the stairs, taking it off, and then running down the stairs. And so they are that perspective that we knew we had been seeing.
Yeah, and so we get to see a lot from their perspective and why, and it makes a lot of sense. Honestly, do we really think this was totally necessary? Like, I guess the only thing that really, to me, is sort of necessary about this is to kind of see the dynamics within their little group. It gives you a little bit of background. Definitely, uh, sort of the whole like take that Audrey has is like basically like kill everybody that's not us. And it doesn't have a ton of like, I don't know, just in terms of the things that they want, what she does doesn't make total sense, but I get it. Like this is a threat from outside of the silo. So um she she is basically like eliminate all threats. And to be fair, it's like them as kids, they have a little baby, they have like I guess another kid who's like maybe 8, or so.
Yeah, or younger.
And they don't, I mean, look, they're really scrapping out their survivor, scrapping like scrabbling out their survival here because they don't have a lot of food. And it's just them. So that's like the different perspective from what they where they are and where Solo is kind of interesting.
And this
And
is all they've known
Mhm.
also. Like we figure out that they were all born since the rebellion. Their parents were even children or babies. I think Eater says her mom
Right.
was a baby when the rebellion happened. I am a little bit concerned about the parentage of Rick and Audrey, the couple in this,
Yep. Yep.
because their parents were a couple, I think, or we might be led to believe that.
Yep.
And
Uh,
now they're a couple.
yep.
Although it's more that dad was his dad and her mom was her mom, but not necessarily vice versa. So maybe they're not siblings, but they could also very well be siblings, who are now mating. And then there's Eater, who or Hope, who they
Mhm.
call Eater, and they despise. And it seems like Hope has had a real rough go of it.
Yeah,
Uh,
because she's the outside person and they blame her for everything.
yeah.
But this also gives, so, we kind of go through the whole tale of how they eventually capture Solo and they're holding him um, hostage because they want to get into the vault. But Audrey just really wants to kill him. And luckily is, you know, kind of held off,
Well,
even
Rick, we've
though,
also had that, like you said, we get to see Rick's motivations, which is he's the soft-hearted one. He
yeah.
threw he threw Juliet at that like flotation device after Audrey had cut the rope when she was trying to swing over to IT the first time.
Well, I mean, honestly, I think the difference in their perspectives is he views other people as possibilities and she doesn't.
Yeah,
And, he's the one who's constantly like, well, if, maybe she can help us get in the vault. Maybe Solo will give us the code so we can get more food. Like, he is more like reasoned and logical, though she's not entirely wrong just because from her perspective,
he killed
everything
their
is a
parents.
threat
Yeah.
and he killed their parents. And this whole thing where she goes and talks to Solo is honestly, again, I have to like honestly give incredible like props to Steve Zahn and like Rebecca Ferguson. Again, their chemistry is and their dynamic is so good. He plays this so well, and when she realizes that he was only a kid when all this happened. And I think it's kind of been coming to her because nothing was totally fitting, and she knows that he isn't Solo. And so when this is coming to her, even when she goes and he's like injured and like he is so childlike, but also just the fact that she came to get him is a big deal to him. Because he hasn't had anybody who's cared about him. And so that I thought was just some of these acting scenes between the two of them
Mhm.
during this episode are some of the most powerful that I think I've seen in the series. So
Yeah. The
and
scene where she goes, where Rebecca Ferguson goes into his bedside,
Yep.
is so powerful. I think I was
Well,
really,
the other one, which I think we'll talk about later, but there's another one like between the two of them, and it's so good. So. Anyway, this was just sort of teasing out the mystery is kind of cool, and we finally hear like that it isn't black and white. Like his or their parents got in there, but they also shot him.
yeah,
Sleep, like he didn't do this just in cold blood. He was scared, and he has to show them the bullet hole. I don't like Audrey's still like I just want to kill him, but um this really to me was just some great scenes between Solo and Juliet.
and you know
Uh,
the when we were talking about how the male voice had given her a warning, like if you don't leave, we'll kill you too, and she
mhm.
gets shot by an arrow 1 second later. That
Yep,
actually checks out because it was him warning her to leave, and Audrey shot her anyway.
yep,
Like, right? Like that
yep,
actually checks out between those two characters. He's
mhm,
like, no, if you leave, we'll be fine. And Audrey's like, nah, we're gonna shoot you.
yep,
So even in hindsight, that scene makes more sense.
yep.
Um, Yeah, these characters are like they're not too deep because how could they be? They're like almost cavemen in a way,
Mhm.
but they are still fascinating, and all of them have like a different perspective. So they're kind of fun to hang out with in a way.
Yep. And then there's the whole piece where, I mean, this is like a lot of back and forth before we get into the vault, but we also there's a lot of different little puzzle pieces, like Juliet realizing that all the numbers that were on the chalkboard were actually the kids' parents trying to figure out the combinations to get into the vault because they
Like
got.
that, we all knew that immediately. Like,
We
how did
did,
she not?
but yeah, and very funny where she was like, "Oh, great, I erased the key like plotted
Why would
towards."
the answer have been in the middle instead of at the end of the
I don't
list?
know. I don't know. Anyway, but there's just a lot there, and and it also allows us to get to know Hope a little bit more.
Yeah,
And
in that scene, I really liked how Hope was like, "Why do people have two names instead of just one? I only had one name." This is the kind of stuff that Solo's been doing to Juliet the whole time too, where she's trying to figure something out, and the person she's with is like just trying to figure out the world, or and just talk to her, and she's like, "Wait, I'm trying to figure out some math right now." And Eater, as we only know her in that scene, is like, "Wait, people have last names?"
yeah, I know. There's so many things that are like, and then there's a lot of these kinds of revelations because when Juliet finally does get Solo to kind of um I don't want to say come out of his shell, but it is a little bit of that. Like admit what's happened and the fact that he was the son of uh the of Russell, who was the head of IT, and that his dad locked him in there to keep him safe. Like that whole scene was so powerful because he had to watch his father being killed in front of him. Um and then all of this knowledge that he has gained, I mean, he's been alone and he's been like literally solo this whole time.
Yeah. What we
Just
don't know is if the algorithm has ever talked to him.
no, we don't. And I feel like not because he would like, I don't know. We'll get to a little bit of that later,
Yeah. Yeah.
but even when he lets them into the vault, all the things that he has done in there, but also like Juliet's never seen this kind of knowledge. Like this is also just an incredible revelation for her in the same way that when Lucas went into the vault in the other silo, um, all these things that were mysteries, these things that she have felt like, oh, these things were like don't make sense. And it still doesn't make sense, but there's a lot more pieces in like that are falling into place. And she's even more motivated to get over the silo, but there's definitely, you know, like the one thing I will say is that it feels like she's slowing down her timeline to get over there. So that's the one part where I was like, maybe you should speed things up a little bit, Juliet, now that we know you have a suit and now just not one suit, but two suits, which was like the thing that she said to Solo, which was like, you know, like it may be in the next episode, sorry, but he said something like, you knew you had like a way to get out, why did you stay?
Yeah.
And and then they don't even say anything, and he like when he puts his hand on her shoulder, like he still
Hmm.
can't like hug her, and that scene is just the probably like just the most amazing scene between the two of them. I
Hmm.
have to like Steve Zahn just phenomenal playing this character, and he doesn't play it too crazy or over the top. Like it is manic and kind of childlike, but there's also a lot of depth there and loneliness there, and he really does
I'm just
just.
glad we got to hear him say the line, "Do I look bad?" again from the
I
perspective of
know.
Audrey and Rick.
Yeah, I know. Huh.
Yeah. So all of that's going on in Silo 17. It's like a whole bunch of stuff has gone on there. We got to see Audrey. I already said we got to see her cut the rope. Um, so all that's happening. They're in the silo. We see or they're in the vault. We get to see all of Solo's origami and how much he's been drawing on the walls in the Smithsonian room. It's a far cry from the pristine version of it in Silo 18. And in Silo 18, things are, we left Walker or Walk as like the mole, and we were so disappointed in her, and we still are, and she's still like people are still going to her for advice. And now it's Knox is going to her to talk to her, and not just Knox, but other people, right? And Lucas is still working on the code, and he's meeting with Bernard and telling him like, "Oh, Salvador Quinn figured out that there's 51 silos," and Bernard's like, "That's not it. Keep going. There's more to it than that." Billings and his wife are trying to figure out why this magazine page is illegal and why is it dangerous? What, people deserve to know more about it. So they're really coming around in their philosophy. Um, and so Billings, Hank, Knox, and Shirley have a meeting, and where Billings is like, "I'm not going to be the fall guy anymore. Um, Juliet's opened my eyes. The lies have to stop." And I keep thinking about what was going on in Silo 17 and how many adults and children there might have been in the intervening years. They talk about how the adults kind of died gradually. I think what was happening was they were voluntarily not eating and dying
Yeah, probably.
while they were starving to death so that the children could live, which is why now there's, these 6 or 5 remaining people alive outside of the vault. And just the tragedy is that Solo could have opened the vault and probably they all could have survived and been okay. Presumably, there's enough food for 10 people in there, I would imagine. Who knows? I don't really know that, but you would think.
Yeah.
That's kind of a bummer.
And this is a little different from the books in that I think that there was some level of the orchards, there was some tiny bit left, which is how they were surviving, but they're not doing that here. Here they're making it like just totally um like vital that they get into the vault, which makes sense. Um but the other thing I will say in the Silo 18, um just back into the walk Knox interaction,
Hmm.
wasn't sure if she understood that he knew it or it was just his face or whatever. Because as that whole storyline plays out, I wasn't sure who was in on it and who wasn't, but I definitely felt like I thought they were setting up something for Walk to walk into. I wasn't sure where they were going with that. So,
Okay. Yeah.
uh, but
Yeah, because he's like it's Teddy's mom. But they're going into Walk's workshop an awful lot to
yeah,
talk about their plans. They're not doing it in the cafeteria as much. A little bit. They do at least one planning meeting in the cafeteria this episode, but they're often in Walk's shop because she's not leaving it, right? She's staying in there as she's commanded to. And Bernard's also reaching out to her on her computer to be like, find out more about the plan. So maybe she's asking them to come to her.
yeah. And then we also have Lucas, who is on his own little journey, and he manages to get down to the lower levels, because he has decoded Quinn's message and basically eventually gets Shirley to bring him um to the lower depths, and she's like kind of like, okay, you're on your own now, man. And he kind of goes all the way down, and we have seen where George did this. And so he eventually gets down, and it is a very creepy thing. Like there is like a tube and like an artificial voice that knows exactly who he is, and basically tells him
Crazy
about.
about this is he gets down to exactly where Juliet had gotten, right? Like suspended above the water.
Hmm.
But he has this theory that he tells Shirley, like that the water isn't that deep.
Hmm.
But the rope isn't that long. I don't know why they couldn't just get 20 more feet of rope.
I
Like so
know,
that the
right?
rope goes into the water so that if you go so that you can get back to the rope. But for whatever reason, the rope is like 3 feet above the water so that if you let go of the rope, you can't get back to it, right? Like if the water is deep, you're done. So that's what makes it actually scary. But it turns out it is actually only hip deep. So once he lands in the water and then he stands up, he's like, haha, I was right, and I'm
Yeah,
not gonna die. But yeah, it's almost like unnecessarily scary.
yeah.
And it's just kind of funny that Juliet was right there.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And you go. So yeah, so he goes, and I mean it's pretty ominous because they know who he is, and
Yep.
then also he now knows that Meadows had come down here.
That's kind of
Um,
laughable, right? I mean, I know it was 25 years ago, but can you
yeah,
imagine?
no, and that would have been weird, but okay.
And
So
George.
yeah, and George, but they didn't tell George or
I guess
something.
George must have just stood in there and then not been addressed by the robot.
Right. And they talk about the safeguard, and we sense that it's pretty bad, whatever it is, and eventually kind of figure out what it is, because of things that we find out in Silo 17. Um, but basically tell Lucas he's not allowed to tell anybody about it because they'll just initiate it. He can't tell anybody about any of this, and that's that. And again, it's a lot of that information hoarding and like keeping information from people. And Lucas is clearly like shaken up by this. And he does,
Well,
you know,
that's the end of the episode. Like it says,
right.
the voice says, "What I'm going to tell you has to be a secret. If you tell anybody, the safeguard will be initiated. Do you understand what the safeguard is?" He says, "Yes." That's cut to black.
Yeah.
But so we don't know what the safeguard is at that point. I think we can guess that it's not good.
Well, given
But
what how Meadows reacted, yeah. So.
yeah, but like I don't understand why the robot voice needs to tell him anything at that point. All he's found is a hatch in the side of the vault with no apparent door handle or
Right.
control panel. Like like George went down there, saw a wall, and then turned around. I mean, he was still curious, but he didn't really figure anything out as far as we know, right? Like he was
Yeah, but
murdered for his trouble, but he didn't get anywhere.
right. And again, you're right. Like the thing didn't have to tell him. I don't know why it would, but that wouldn't, I guess the story wouldn't drive forward if they didn't do that.
It doesn't feel
Um,
like it would. But
uh,
Luke, yeah, so that kind of takes you right to the end of that episode with uh with apparently like more momentum with the rebellion. Bernard has just been hanging out in the surveillance room being telling Amundsen not to let anybody disturb him, so that Lucas Kyle cannot tell him what he's discovered.
right.
Leaving him to kind of scamper all over the silo
Yep.
on his own.
And then we also have Billings coming trying to like make an ally in the least likely place with Sims. So he gives him the page that he had shown to Kathleen, and this really kind of shakes up Camille and Sims. And even Billings said that he didn't want to give it to Sims. He wanted to give it to Camille because she's the one who the helped Shirley and Knox get back down and
Yeah.
escape. And then we also have um, the the part of the sheriff's team where Bernard basically tells all the remaining deputies that Billings has betrayed everybody, that he's part of everything, and that they're gonna like have to like get rid of him. There are a lot of side eyes in that conversation, so
Yeah.
you definitely get that there's like a lot of skepticism since
Well,
Billings is,
mostly it's the side eyes of the at least the two people that we know are sympathetic to Paul Billings. The two people who have repeatedly
yeah, shown.
questioned Bernard and helped out mechanical people. For the rest of them, we have no idea what they're, which way they lean.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of still up in the air. Uh, but Bernard
And
is still, moving his pieces around the board for sure.
And then we also have Patrick Kennedy keeps popping up in here, and
Hmm.
he is talking about what he thinks is true, which is that the display is a lie. And this is all based upon the glimpse that he and others had seen when Juliet tried to kind of like take over the sort of monitors and basically said him and anybody who had seen it was not there, but he believes it. He believes that Juliet's alive, and he tells all this to Kathleen. And I think other people saw it, but maybe didn't admit to seeing it, or they didn't know that they saw it. So, or IT didn't know that they saw it. So everything's kind of going to hell. He's still trying to keep things under control, but I would say just the way things are clearly very much out of control. So
I think he thinks he's got it because he thinks he's got that ace in the hole with Walk and
okay,
he's getting all the information he needs. Because as Knox tells him, he thinks he knows who the mole is and says the wrong name, and then starts to tell Walk his plan. Bernard's like, "Oh, I have you now." So that's I think he's very very happy about the way things are going. Um, And so that's where we're going to leave you, gentle listeners. That was episode 9, Silo, season 2, The Safeguard. Next time, join us again when we go into the fire, the season 2 finale, episode 10.
And until next time, ciao.
Thanks for listening, and bye bye for now.